Hello from the underground. It is May the 11th, and we are continuing on Balzac's �𝐿𝐵𝐢, somewhere around page 150A. Things look promising for me, for she did not resent it when I said, "Can you love me?" The bit is in the horse's mouth now. It only remains to mount and take control, Eugene told himself as he went to pay his respects to Madame de Basson, who had risen and was about to leave with the adjutant. He did not know, poor student, that the Baroness's thoughts were far from him. She was expecting a letter from de Marsay, one of those fearful letters that lacerate the heart. Happy in his delusion, Eugene accompanied the Viscountess to the peristyle, where people wait for the carriages. "Your cousin looks like a different man," said the Portuguese, laughing, to the Viscountess, when Rastignac had left them. "He's going to break the bank. He's as supple as an eel, and I think he will go far. But no one but you could have picked a woman out of the dovecote for him at the very moment when she needed a consoler. But," said Madame de Basson, "we don't know whether she still loves the man who is forsaking her." The student walked back from the Theatre Italien to the Rue Neuve Sainte-Geneviève, revolving as he went the most delightful schemes. He had not failed to notice the close scrutiny Madame de Restaud had favored him when he entered the Viscountess's box and sat later in Madame de Nucingen's, and concluded that the Countess's door would not be closed in the future. He had now 4 important allies, for he counted on impressing the Marshal's wife favorably in the innermost circles of Parisian society. He was aware by now that in the complicated play of forces set up in this world by the action and reaction of various interests, he must attach himself to part of the machinery if he wanted to rise to the top of the machine, and, without defining the means he must use too clearly, he felt himself strong enough to grasp at it and make it bear his weight. "If Madame de Nucingen takes an interest in me, I will teach her to manage her husband. The husband deals in the money market, and with his help I might pick up a fortune in one stroke of business." He did not state this badly to himself in so many words. He had not the subtlety yet to sum up a situation, estimate its possibilities, and calculate its chances. These ideas floated on the horizon of his mind in the form of a hazy cloud, and although they had not the barbarity of Vautrine's reflections, they would have yielded nothing very pure if tested in the crucible of conscience. So men lapse, by a succession of compromises with evil of that kind, into a lax moral state, which is characteristic of this epoch. Today, one meets more rarely than in any previous age with those firmly based, unyielding men who stand foursquare against temptation, to whom the slightest deviation from a straight line of rectitude amounts to crime. Such magnificent figures of integrity as have inspired 2 masterpieces, Molière's Alceste, and in our own day, Jeannie Deans and her father in Walter Scott's novel. Perhaps a work of the converse kind, depicting the devious paths into which a man of the world, a man of ambition, forces his conscience as he tries to sail close to the wind to reach his end while keeping up appearances, would be not less fine nor less dramatic. Rastignac arrived at his lodging in a state of admiration of Madame de Nucingen's charms. He remembered how slender she was, as clean-lined and graceful as a swallow, the intoxicating sweetness of her eyes, the delicate, silky texture of her skin under which it seemed to him he could perceive the flow of the blood, the enchantment of her voice, her fair hair. He recalled them one by one, and perhaps The exercise of walking, by quickening his blood, enhanced her fascinations. He knocked impetuously at Goriot's door. "I have seen Madame Delphine," he said. "Where?" "At the Italiens." "Was she enjoying herself?" "Come in." And the old fellow got out of bed, opened the door, and promptly returned to bed again. Eugene, who had never been in old Goriot's room before, could not repress a start of astonishment when, coming straight from the theatre, where he had admired the daughter's finery, he saw the wretched hole, which was the father's living place. The window was curtainless. In several places damp had made the paper peel away from the walls and curl up, revealing the smoke-darkened plaster. The old fellow lay in a miserable bed, with but one thin blanket and a wadded quilt made from the less worn pieces of Madame Vauquer's old dresses. The floor was damp and dirty. Opposite the window stood a chest of drawers made of rosewood, one of the old-fashioned kind with a bulging front and brass handles representing twisted vine stems bearing leaves or flowers. On an ancient piece of furniture topped with a wooden shelf stood an ewer and wash basin, and all the things required for shaving. Shoes lay in one corner. A table by the bedside lacked both door and marble top. By the empty grate, which showed no trace of fire, stood the square walnut table whose crossbar Goriot had made use of to crush his silver tureen. A ramshackle writing dress, on which lay the old man's hat, an armchair stuffed with straw, and 2 chairs completed the pitiful furniture. From the canopy of the bed, which was secured to the ceiling by a tatter, hung a ragged strip of cheap red and white checked material. The humblest errand boy could not have been worse lodged in the attic than old Goriot was in Madame Vauquer's boarding house. Just to look at this room made you shudder and feel oppressed. It was like a prison's most dismal cell. Fortunately, Goriot did not see the expression on Eugene's face as the student put down his candle on the bedside table. The old man turned on his side and lay with the bedclothes drawn up to his chin. "Well," he said, "which do you like best, Madame de Restaud or Madame de Nucingen?" "I like Madame Delphine the best," replied the student, "because she loves you the most." When he heard these words, which were warmly spoken, the old fellow thrust an arm out from under the bedclothes and grasped Eugene's hand. Thank you," he said gratefully. "What did she say about me?" The student repeated the Baroness's words, with some embellishments of his own, and the old man listened as if he were hearing Holy Writ. "Dear child," he said, Yes, indeed, she is very fond of me. But don't believe what she said about Anastasie. The 2 sisters are jealous of each other, don't you see? It's one more proof of their affection. Madame de Restaud is very fond of me, too, I'm sure of it. A father with his children is like God with all of us. He sounds the depths of the heart and judges the intentions. One is as loving as the other. Oh, if I had had good sons-in-laws, I would have been so happy. No happiness here below can be complete, I suppose. If I had lived with them, my heart would have danced with joy at hearing their voices and knowing that they were there, and seeing them go out and come in as I used to when I had been come in as I used to when I had them with me at home. Were they nicely dressed? Yes, said Eugene. But, Monsieur Goriot, when your daughters have such splendid houses, how can you live in a hole like this? Heavens, he said, with seeming casualness. Why should I want a better lodging? I can hardly explain how things are. I'm not very good at stringing words together. It's all there, he added, tapping his heart. My life is lived through my 2 girls. If they are enjoying themselves, if they are happy and finely dressed and have carpets to walk on, what does it matter what sort of clothes cover me? or what sort of place I sleep in. I don't feel cold if they are warm, and I'm never dull if they are laughing. The only troubles I have are their troubles. You will know what it's like when you are a father. When you say to yourself as you listen to your children's prattle, they take their life from me. When you feel that you are bound to those little creatures by every drop of blood in your veins, of which they are the creatures, of which they are the creation and the fine flower, for that's how it is. You will feel as if their skin covered your own body, and as if you went with them in every step they took. I hear their voice answer me everywhere. A sad glance from them makes my blood run cold. Someday you will know that a father is much happier in his children's happiness than in his own. I cannot explain it to you. It is a feeling in your body that spreads gladness through you. In short, I live 3 times over. Shall I tell you something strange? Well, when I became a father, I understood God. He is there, complete in everything, because creation sprang from him. It is just like that with me and my daughters. Only I love my daughters more than God loves the world, for the world is not as beautiful as God is, and my daughters are more beautiful than I. They dwell so closely to my soul that I had a feeling somehow that you would see them this evening. By heaven, I would be the devoted slave of a man who would make my little Delphine as happy as a woman is when she is adored. I would black his boots and run his errands for him. I knew from what her maid told me that the little Monsieur de Marseille was a miserable cur. I have longed at times to wring his neck. What? He does not love a jewel of a woman with a nightingale's voice, and made like a model? Had she no eyes when she married that great dog of an Alsatian? They should both have had nice, handsome young men with whom they could have loved. Ah, well, they followed their fancy. Old Goriot was sublime. Eugene had never before had the chance of seeing him ablaze with the fires of paternal love. The power of animation strong feelings possesses is worthy of remark. However heavy the clay of which a man is made, as soon as he gives utterances to a deep and true affection, there flows from him an ethereal fluid which modifies the aspects of his face, gives life to his gestures and color to his voice. Impelled by passion, the most stupid human being often achieves the highest eloquence of ideas, if not of words, and seems to move in a world irradiated. Just then, the voice and gesture of a simple old man had the power of winning an instant responsive sympathy, which distinguishes the great actor. But are not our deep affections the poetry created by the mind? Well, said Eugene, perhaps you will not be so sorry to hear that she is likely to break with Marseille soon. That fine fellow has left her pursue the Princess �𝐥𝐿𝐵. For my part, I fell in love with Madame Delphine this evening. Nonsense, said old Goriot. I did indeed, and I found some favor in her eyes. We talked love for a whole hour, and I am to go and see her the day after tomorrow, Saturday. Oh, my dear sir, how I should love you if she grew fond of you. You are kind, and would never cause her pain. If you did forsake her, I would cut your throat at once. A woman does not love twice, you know. But, heavens, I am talking rubbish. Monsieur Eugene, it's cold here. You should not stay. And so you really heard her speak? What message did she give you for me? None at all, said Eugene to himself. She told me, he replied aloud, to say that your daughter sent you a loving kiss. Good night, my neighbor. Sleep well, and pleasant dreams. After your message, I've no need to dream. God grant you all you wish. You have come this evening like a good angel, and brought a sweet breath for my daughter. Poor man, said Eugene as he went to bed. It's enough to touch a heart of stone. His daughters no more thought of him than she did of the Grand Turk. This conversation made old Goriot perceive that his neighbor was an unlooked-for confidant and friend. They were joined together by the only bond with which this old man could be attached to another man. The passions never make mistakes. Old Goriot felt himself a little closer to his daughter Delphine. He thought that he would be more welcome if Eugene were dear to her. Moreover, he had confided one of the things that troubled him to Eugene. Madame de Nucingen, whose happiness he prayed for 1,000 times a day, had never known the sweetness of love. Most certainly Eugene was, to use his own expression, one of the nicest young men he had ever seen, and he seemed to feel prophetically that she would find in Eugene all the joy that she had missed. Thus, a friendship would begin between the old man and the neighbor, which went on growing. But for this friendship, it would almost certainly have been impossible to learn how this story ended. Next morning at breakfast, old Goriot looked affectionately at Eugene when he came in, and took a seat beside the student. The other lodgers watched him in surprise as they heard him address a few remarks to his neighbor, and noticed the change of his face, which, as a rule, had as little expression as a plaster cast. Vautrin stared at the student as if he would read his soul. This was the first time he had seen him since their talk. Before falling asleep the night before, Eugene had surveyed the vast field of opportunity that lay before him, and now, as he thought of Vautrin's plan, he was inevitably reminded of Mademoiselle Taillefer's dowry, and he could not help looking at Victorine as the most virtuous young man may look at a wealthy heiress. She chanced to glance at him, and their eyes met. The glance which they exchanged was sufficiently expressive to leave Rastignac in no doubt that she felt for him that vague emotion that stirs in the hearts of all young girls, and finds its object in the nearest attractive human being. 800,000 francs, a voice cried in his ear. But he hastily summoned up his memories of the evening before, and told himself that his made-to-order passion for Madame de Nucingen was his safeguard, and a refuge from evil thoughts that pursued him against his will. They were doing Rossini's Barber of Seville at the Italians yesterday, he said. I never heard such delightful music. People with a box at the Italians have heaven's own luck. Goriot hung on his lips and watched his face like a dog ready to jump at his master's first movement. You men live in clover, said Madame Baker. You do just what you like. How did you get back? Vautrin asked. I walked, replied Eugene. You're not like me, rejoined the tempter. I don't care to do things by halves. I should like to go to the theater in my carriage, sit in my box, and come back comfortably. All or nothing, that's my motto. And a good one, too, said Madame Baker. Perhaps you will see Madame de Nucingen today, said Eugene in a low voice to Goriot. She is sure to receive you with open arms. She will want to ask you lots of little things about me. I have heard that she would do anything in the world to be received at my cousin's, Madame Nabasson's. Don't forget to tell her that I love her too much not to have thought of trying to give her that pleasure. Rastignac went off to the École de Droit at once. He did not want to stay longer than he had to in that hateful house. Afterwards, he spent nearly the whole day idly loafing, a prey to the fever of the brain, well known to young men afflicted with too lively expectations. Vautrin's argument gave him food for thought, and he was lost in meditation upon the social order when he chanced to meet his friend Biancan at the Jardin du Luxembourg. Where did you get that solemn face? Said the medical student, putting an arm around his and walking on with him towards the palace. Temptations give me no peace. What kind of temptations? Temptations can be got rid of. How? By yielding to them. You may laugh, but you don't know what you're laughing at. Have you read Rousseau? Yes. Do you remember the passage when he asked the reader what he would do if he could make a fortune by killing an old mandarin in China by simply exerting his will, without stirring from Paris? Yeah. Well, I'm at my 33rd mandarin. Don't play the fool. Look here, if it were proved to you that the thing was possible and you only needed to nod your head, would you do it? Is your mandarin well stricken in years? But, bless you, young or old, paralytic or healthy, upon my word, the devil take it. Well, no. You're a good chap, Biancan. But suppose you loved a woman madly enough to turn your conscience inside out for her, and she needed money, a lot of money, for her clothes, her carriage, all her whims, in fact. You turn my head, and then ask me to use it. Biancan, I'm out of my mind. See if you can cure me. I have 2 sisters who are angels of beauty and innocence, and I want them to be happy. Where am I to get 200,000 francs for the dowry within 5 years? That's the question that confronts me. There are circumstances in life, you see, when you have to play for big stakes, and it's no use wasting your luck picking up pennies. But you're simply stating the problem that everybody entering on life is faced with. And you want to cut the Gordian knot with a sword. If you act like that, my dear fellow, you must be Alexander. Otherwise, you go to prison. I'm quite content myself with my humble fortune, to live the quiet country life I mean to fashion for myself, to step into my father's shoes in due course like a stick in the mud. A man's affections are just as fully satisfied within the smallest circle as in a vast circumference. Even Napoleon could only dine once, and could have no more mistresses than a medical student takes when he's living at the Kopkins. Happiness, my dear fellow, will always lie in what's between the soles of our feet and the crown on our head. And whether it costs 1,000,000 a year or only 100 louis, our appreciation of it is the same in essence, and rests entirely with us. I come to the conclusion that the Chinaman should be allowed to live. Thanks, Biancan. You have done me good. We will always be cronies, you and I. Look here, remarked the medical student. Just now as I was coming from the Colbert's lecture at the Jardin des Plantes, I saw that Marquenau woman and Poirier sitting on a bench, talking to a gentleman I saw in the disturbances last year, hanging about the chambers des députés. It struck me that when he was a tool of the police disguised as an honest retired tradesman, we had better keep an eye on that pair. I'll tell you why later. Goodbye. I must go to answer at my name at 4 o'clock. When Eugene returned to the boarding house, he found old Goriot waiting for him. Look, said the old man. Here's a letter from her. Isn't the handwriting pretty? Eugene broke open the seal and read as follows. My father has told me, monsieur, that you like Italian music. I shall be delighted if you will do me the pleasure of accepting a seat in my box. We are to hear Fodor and Pellegrini on Saturday, so I am sure you will not refuse me. Monsieur de Nucingen joins me in requesting that you dine with us informally. If you accept, you will please him by making it unnecessary for him to escort me, a husband's duty which he finds irksome. Do not answer, simply come. Yours sincerely, D.E.N. Let's see it, said the old fellow when Eugene had read the letter. Will you go? You will, won't you? He added, holding the writing paper against his face. How nice it smells. Her fingers have touched that. It's easy to see. A woman doesn't throw herself at a man's head like that, the student was thinking. She wants to use me to bring de Marsay back. Only pique could make a person act that way. Well, said Goriot, what are you thinking about? Eugene was not aware of the mad vanity which possessed some women at the time. He did not know that to open a door in the Faubourg Saint-Germain, a banker's wife would stick at nothing. Those who were admitted to the company of the Faubourg Saint-Germain clique were regarded by the fashion of the day as queens among women. They were known as dames de petit château, and in this set, Madame de Basson, her friend, the Duchess de Langeais, and the Duchess de Montfreniers were brilliant stars. Rastignac was alone in his ignorance of the feverish efforts made by women of the Chaussée d'Antin to climb to these lofty spheres where the brightest constellations of their sex shone. But this disgustful disposition served him well. It gave him coolness of judgment, and that not altogether pleasurable power of imposing conditions instead of submitting to them. Yes, I will go, he answered Goriot. So, curiosity led him to Madame de Nucingen, yet if she had treated him with disdain, he might well have been brought to her by passion. Nevertheless, it was not without a certain amount of impatience that he waited for the next day to come, and the hour when he would go to her. The first intrigue was perhaps as much charm for a young man as a first love affair. The certainty of success is a source of great happiness, although no man ever acknowledges this. And it is in this that all charm of certain women lies. The desire to conquer is as quickly aroused by the easiness of a triumph as by its difficulty. These two incentives excite or sustain every human passion and divide love's empire between them. Perhaps this division is one of the consequences of the great question of temperaments which, whatever people may say about it, is a dominant force in society. Though melancholic men may need the stimulation of flirtatious rebuff, the nervous or sanguine may be put to rout if resistance lasts too long. In other words, the paean of victory is as essential to the choleric temperament as the mournful, pleading, elegiac strain is to the lymphatic. As he got ready, Eugene took all the pleasures in the details of his toilet that young men usually enjoy, because such dandyism tickles their vanity, although they dare not breathe a word of it for fear of being laughed at. He thought as he arranged his hair, how a pretty woman's glance would steal over the dark curls. He indulged in as much childish prinking as a young girl dresses for a ball. As he smoothed out the creases in his coat, he looked complacently at his slim figure and said to himself, "There are certainly worse-looking people in the world." Then he came downstairs when all the boarding-house guests were seated at the dinner table, and received with a gay good humor the uproarious burst of silly witticisms which the elegant dress excited, the boorish amazement which a well-groomed appearance is regarded, is characteristic of boarding-house manners. No one can wear a new coat, but everyone must make his comment. "Tch, tch, tch, tch," said Biancan, clicking his tongue against the roof of his mouth, as if to encourage a horse. "As smart as a duke or a belted earl," cried Madame Vacher. "Is this gentleman going courting?" inquired Mademoiselle Machena. "Cock-a-doodle-doo," cried the artist. "My compliment to your lady spouse," This came from the museum official. Have you a spouse? Asked Poirier. Yes, a spouse with compartments, watertight and buoyant, fast color guaranteed, prices from 25 to 40, checked patterns in the latest fashion, washes well, looks pretty, half linen, half cotton, half woolen, cures toothaches and other complaints approved by the Royal College of Physicians, excellent for children as well. Better still as a remedy for headaches, feelings of fullness, and other maladies of the esophagus, eyes, and ears, cried Vautrin, with a comic volubility and patter of a quack at a fair. And how much shall we say for this marvel, gentlemen? 2 sous? It's just giving it away, all that is left of stock supplied by the great mogul, and all the crowned heads of Europe, including the Grand Duke of Baden, wished to see it. Walk up, straight in front of you, and pay at the desk. Strike up the band. Barum, la, latin, la, la, bom, bom. You there, sir, play the clarinet. You're out of tune. He went on hoarsely. I'll rap your knuckles for you. Goodness, what an amusing man he is, said Madame Bocquer to Madame Couture. I should never know a dull moment with him in the house. Under cover of the outbursts of laughter and joking provided by this comical oration, Eugene caught Mademoiselle Taillefer's surreptitious glance as she bent over Madame Couture and whispered a few words in her ear. The cab's here, Sylvie announced. But where is he going to dine? Asked Bianchon. At the Baroness de Nucingen's. Monsieur Goriot's daughter, the student added. At this, all eyes were turned to the old vermicelli maker, who was gazing at Eugene with some envy. When he reached the Rue Saint-Lazare, Rastignac found that his destination was one of those airy houses with slender pillars and a mean portico that Parisians call pretty. It was a true banker's house, full of costly showiness, with stucco work on the walls and landings of marble mosaic. He found Madame de Nucingen in a little drawing-room hung with paintings in the Italian style and decorated like a restaurant. The Baroness seemed in low spirits. The efforts she made to hide her sadness excited all the more interest in Eugene because they were entirely without guile. He had expected to delight a woman by his presence and found her despondent. This disappointment piqued his vanity. I have very little right to claim your confidence, madame, he said, after rallying her on her preoccupation. But if I am in the way, I count on your good faith. Please tell me so frankly. No, stay with me, she said. I would be all alone if he went away. Nucingen is dining in town, and I do not want to be alone. I need distraction. But what is wrong? You are the last person I should tell, she exclaimed. I should like to know. I must be concerned in some way in this secret. Perhaps, but no, she went on. It's one of those family quarrels that ought to be buried in the depths of one's heart. Did I not tell you something about it the day before yesterday? I am not happy at all. Chains of gold are the heaviest chains to bear. When a woman tells a young man that she is very unhappy, if this young man is intelligent and well-dressed and has 1,500 francs lying idle in his pocket, he is bound to think what Eugene thought and grows a little conceited. What can you have wished for? He replied. You are young, beautiful, rich, adored. Don't let's talk about me, she said, with a dismal shake of her head. We will dine alone together, and go to hear the most enchanting music afterwards. Do I look all right? She went on, rising and displaying her dress, which was of white cashmere, with ornamental Parisian works of the most exquisite richness. "I wish you were all mine," said Eugene. "You are charming." "You would have a sorry piece of property," she said, smiling bitterly. "Nothing here speaks of misfortune, and yet in spite of all appearances I am in despair. I can't sleep because of my troubles. I shall be quite ugly soon." "Oh, that's impossible," said the student. "But I am curious to know what troubles these are that cannot be smoothed out by devoted love." "Ah, if I told you about them, then you would fly from me," she said. "You love me only by a gallant convention, which is a sort of good manners in men. But if you really loved me, you would be plunged into dreadful despair. You see that I must hold my peace. For pity's sake, let's speak of something else. Come and see my rooms." "No, let's stay here," said Eugene, sitting down on a sofa before the fire near Madame 𝐎𝐿𝐵𝐿, and boldly taking her hand. She let him take it, and even pressed the young man's fingers in a vehement grasp that betrayed intense emotion. "Listen," said Rastignac. "If you have troubles, you must tell me about them. I want to prove to you that I love you for your own sake. Either you will talk to me frankly and tell me of your sorrows so that I can put an end to them, even if it entails killing half a dozen men, or I shall go and never come back again." "Very well," she cried, striking her forehead in an agony of despair. "I'll put you to the test this very moment. Yes," she added to herself, "there's no longer any other way." She rang the bell. "Is your master's carriage ready?" she asked the footman. "Yes, madame." "Then I shall take it. You must give him mine, with my horses. Do not serve dinner until 7 o'clock. "Come with me," she said to Eugene, who thought, when he found himself in the banker's carriage beside Madame 𝐎𝐿𝐵𝐿, that he must surely be dreaming. "To the Palais Royal," she said to the coachman, "near the Theatre François." On the way she appeared troubled and excited, and gave no answer to the innumerable questions put to her by Eugene, who did not know what to make of this obstinate silence, this mute resistance. "In another minute she'll slip through my fingers," he said to himself. When the carriage stopped, the Baroness looked at the student in a way which arrested a wild rush of words on his lips, for his feelings had been wrought to breaking point. "Do you really love me?" she said. "Yes," he replied, hiding his uneasiness which filled him. "You will not think ill of me, whatever I may ask you to do?" "No." "You are ready to obey me, blindly?" "Have you ever been to a gambling house?" she said in a voice that shook. "Never." I can breathe again. You will have luck. Here is my purse. Take it," she said. "There are 100 francs in it, all that such a fortunate woman possesses. Go to a gambling house. I don't know where they are, but I know that there are some near the Palais Royal. Stake the 100 francs in a game they call roulette, and either lose it all or bring me back 6,000 francs. I will tell you my troubles when you come back." "The devil fly away with me if I understand in the least what I'm going to do, but I will obey you," he said, with exultation at the thought. "She has committed herself too deeply to draw back. She can refuse me nothing now." Eugene took the pretty purse and hurried to number 9, the nearest gambling house pointed out to him by an old clothes dealer. He went upstairs, gave up his hat, and asked the way to the roulette table. An attendant took him, much to the astonishment of the regular clients, to the long table, in spite of the stares of all all the spectators, Eugene demanded, without any false shame, to be told where he should put his stake. If you put a louis on any one of the 36 numbers and it comes up, you will win 36 louis, said a respectable-looking elderly man with white hair. Eugene threw the 100 francs on the number of his age, 21. Before he had time to collect his thoughts, there was a cry of surprise. He had won without knowing what he did. "Take off your money," said the elderly gentleman. "One doesn't win twice by that system." Eugene took the rake the man handed to him, drew in his 3,600 francs, and, still knowing nothing of the game, staked again on the red. The bystanders watched him enviously as he continued to play. The wheel turned. He won again, and the banker threw him 3,600 francs once more. "That's 7,200 francs you have now," said the elderly man in his ear. "Take my advice and go. The bread had turned up 8 times. If you are charitable, you will acknowledge this good counsel and by relieving the distress of an old prefect of Napoleon's, who is down on his luck." Rastignac, in a daze, saw the white-haired man pocket 10 louis and went out with his 7,000 francs, as ignorant of the game as ever, but dumbfounded by his luck. "So that's that. And now where will you take me?" he said, showing the 7,000 francs to Madame de Nucingen as soon as the carriage door had closed behind him. Delphine flung her arms wildly around him and kissed him fervently, but without passion. "You saved me," she cried, and tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "I'm going to tell you everything, my friend. You will be my friend, won't you? You think I am rich, very rich. I want for nothing, or so it appears. Let me tell you that Monsieur de Nucingen does not let me have control of 1 sou. He pays for everything, all the household expenses, and my carriages and box at the theatre. He gives me an allowance, but it is not enough to pay for my dress. He reduces me to a secret poverty by cold-blooded design. I should be the vilest of creatures if I bought his money at the price he wants me to pay. And you are wondering how I could ever have let myself be stripped of every penny when I had a fortune of 700,000 francs of my own. Through pride, through indignation. You are so young, so simple, when we began married life. But I ought to have asked my husband for money. The words stuck in my throat. I could not utter them. I spent the money I had saved, and when my poor father gave me, then I ran into debt. Marriage for me is a horrible mockery. I cannot talk to you about it. Let it suffice to say that I would throw myself out of the window if I had to live with Nucingen in any other way than as we do now, in separate rooms. When I had to confess my debts to him, debts that every young woman runs up, for jewelry and trifles of various kinds, my poor father indulged us so much that we had grown accustomed to refuse ourselves nothing. I suffered tortures. But in the end I found the courage to declare them, for after all, had I not a fortune of my own? Nucingen flew into a rage, and said that I would ruin him, and all kinds of brutal things. I longed for the earth to open up and bury me 100 feet down. As he had taken my dowry, he paid. But he stipulated that I should keep to a fixed allowance for my personal expenses from that day on, and I gave way for the sake of peace. And then, she went on, I wanted to do what suited the self-esteem of someone whom you know. Even if he has delivered me, I should be wrong not to say that he was magnanimous. But after all, in the end he left me shamefully. If a person who heaped money on a woman in an hour of need should never forsake her, he should love her forever. A high-principled man like you, the soul of honor, 21 years old, with all the innocence of youth, will ask me how a woman could take money from a man. Oh, God, Is it not so natural to share everything with the being to whom we owe our happiness? One who has given oneself completely. Who could worry about a fraction of that whole? Money counts for something only when feeling is dead. He had not bound one's. Has one not bound oneself for life? Which of us foresees a separation when she believes herself dearly loved? You swear eternal love to us. How then can we have interests apart? You do not know what I suffered today when 𝐎𝐥𝐝 absolutely refused to give me 6,000 francs, a sum he gives every month to his mistress, an opera dancer. I thought of killing myself. The maddest thoughts came into my head. There were moments when I envied a servant's lot, the whole of my own, maid. How should I look to my father for help? That would be senseless. Anastasie and I between us have bled him white. My poor father would have sold himself if his body could have been fetched for 6,000 francs. I should only have driven him to despair, to no purpose. You have saved me from shame and death. I was besides myself with anguish. Monsieur, I owe you this explanation. I treated you in a preposterously unreasonable way. When you left me just now, I couldn't see you any longer. I wanted to run away. Where? I do not know. Half the women in Paris live a life like mine, with luxury on the surface and cruel cares in the heart. I know of poor creatures even more unhappy than I. Indeed, there are women who are driven to ask their tradesmen to present false accounts, and others to rob their husbands. Some men believe that a cashmere shawl worth 100 louis is given away for 500 francs, and other husbands that a 500-franc shawl is worth 100 louis. Poor women exist who let their children go hungry, and scrimp and save to get a dress because they have no money. At least I am innocent of those mean shifts. This is my last affliction. If some women sell themselves to their husbands in order to dominate them, I, at any rate, am free. I could have gold heaped on me by 𝐎𝐥𝐝 if I chose, but I prefer to weep with my head on the heart of a man I can respect. Tonight, Monsieur de Marsay will no longer have the right to look on me as a woman he has paid. She covered her face with her hands to hide her tears from Eugene, but he drew her hands away and looked at her. She seemed to him sublime at that moment. To mix money with love, isn't that horrible? You could not love me now. Eugene was overwhelmed by this reflection of the idea of honor which made women so great, combined so strangely as it was with a discourse of the transgressions which society, as it is at present constituted, forces on them. He murmured gentle, consoling words, and marveled at the beautiful woman beside him, so artlessly indiscreet in her cry of grief. You will not use this weapon against me, will you? She said. Promise me. Oh, madame, I could not, he answered. She took his hand and placed it on her heart in a gesture full of gratitude and sweetness. Thanks to you, I'm free again and happy. I was living as if I were squeezed in an iron hand. I mean to live simply now, without spending a penny. You will like me just as well, won't you, my friend? Keep this one, she added, and she took only 6 of the banknotes. To be exact, I owe you 3,000 francs, for I really should go halves with you. Eugene protested as fiercely as a maiden defending her honor, but when the Baroness said, I must look on you as my enemy, if you are not my confederate, he took the money. It shall be a stake held in reserve, in case of misfortune, he said. That's what I was afraid of hearing, she exclaimed, turning pale. If you want me to count for anything in your life, swear to me that you will never enter a gambling house again. By heaven, if I should corrupt you, I should die by sorrow." By this time he had arrived at the Rue Saint-Lazare. Eugene was stunned by the contrast between the magnificence of the house and the wretched state of its mistress, and Vautrin's sinister words began to echo in his ears. "Sit down there," said the Baroness, pointing to a low chair near the fire in her room. "I have a very difficult letter to write. Give me your advice." "Don't write anything," said Eugene. "Put the banknotes in an envelope, address it, and send them by your maid." "You're a darling," she said. "Ha! Now we see what it is to have been well brought up." "That's pure de bon sens," she added, laughing. "She is charming," said Eugene to himself, falling deeper in love every moment. She looked around the room, which betrayed a certain vulgarity of taste in its voluptuous luxury. "Do you like it?" she asked, as she rang for her maid. "Therese, take this to the Monsieur de Marseille yourself, and give it to his own hands. If he is not at home, bring the letter back to me." Therese took the letter and threw a malicious glare at Eugene as she left the room. Dinner was unannounced. Rastignac gave his arm to Madame de Nucingen, and they walked to an exquisite dining room, where he saw a display as sumptuous as that which had excited his wonder at his cousin's. "You must come to dinner in opera days," she said, "and escort me to the Italiens afterwards. I should soon grow accustomed to this pleasant life if it were to last, but I am a poor student with my way to make." "Don't worry, you will prosper," she said, laughing. "You see, everything turns out well. I did not expect to be so happy." It is part of woman's nature to prove the impossible to be possible, and upset facts by their intuition. When Madame de Nucingen and Rastignac took their seats in her box at the Buffon's, her face wore a look of happiness which made her so beautiful that deflammatory remarks rose unchecked in everyone's lips. Against such aspersions, women have no defense, and they often cause gratuitously invented slanders to be accepted as the truth. People who know Paris never believe a word of what is said, and say nothing of what is done there. Eugene took the Baroness's hand, and they shared the pleasure the music gave them with each other by the light touch or closer grasping of their fingers. For both of them, it was an evening of intoxicating joy, and when they left together, Madame de Nucingen insisted on taking Eugene in her carriage as far as the Pont Neuf, refusing him, by the way, one of the kisses she had so warmly lavished on him at the Palais Royal. Eugene reproached her with this inconsistency. "Oh, it was gratitude, then, for devotion I had not hoped for," she replied, "but now it would be a promise." "And if you don't want to make me any promise, ungrateful woman," he said huffily. With one of those quick, impetuous gestures that delight a lover, she held out her hand for his kiss, and he took it with a sulkiness she found enchanting. "I shall see you on Monday at the ball," she said. Walking home under the calm, clear light of the moon, Eugene fell into serious thought. He was both happy and regretful. Happy in an adventure whose probable outcome would give him his desire, one of the prettiest and most elegant women in Paris. Regretful at seeing his plans to gain a fortune brought to nothing. And it was then that The thought had passed vaguely through his mind 2 days before took definite shape. Disappointment always shows us how strong our hopes were. The more Eugene enjoyed of the pleasures of life in Paris, the less he wanted to remain obscure and poor. He crumpled the 1,000-franc note in his pocket and thought of dozens of plausible arguments for keeping it for himself. At last, he reached the Rue Neuve Sainte-Geneviève, and at the top of the stairs saw a light burning. Old Goriot had left the door open and his candle alight to prevent the student from forgetting to tell him all about his daughters. To use his own expression, Eugene told him the whole story. "What?" cried Eugene in frenetic jealousy and grief. "They think I'm ruined, do they? Yet I still have an income of 13,000 louis a year. Good heavens, the poor little things. Why didn't she come to me? I should have sold some of my stocks and shares. We could have used some of the principal and bought a life annuity for me with which was left. My good neighbor, you should have come and told me about her difficulty. How could you have the heart to risk her poor little 100 francs on a turn of the wheel? It's enough to break one's heart, and that's what sons-in-laws are. Oh, if I could only lay my hands on them, it would wring their necks. My God, did you say she was crying?" "With her head on my waistcoat," said Eugene. "Oh, give it to me," said Eugene. "What? My daughter's tears have fallen on this? My darling Delphine, who never cried when she was a little girl. I'll buy you another one. Don't wear this again. Leave it with me. By the terms of her marriage settlement, she should enjoy the use of her own property. I'll get a hold of that Derville tomorrow. He's a lawyer. I'll see that her money is invested in her own name. I know the law. I'm an old wolf. I mean to show my teeth." "Take this, Papa. It's 1,000 francs which she wanted to give me out of our winnings. Keep it for her in the waistcoat pocket." Goriot looked at him and on his hand as the old man reached out to grasp it, and the student felt a tear fall. "You will succeed in life," said the old man. "God is just, you understand. I know an honest man when I see one, and I can tell you there are very few men like you. So you wish to be my dear child too. Go to sleep. You can sleep, for you are not a father yet. She was crying, you tell me, and I was calmly eating my dinner like an idiot while she was suffering. I, who would sell the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost to save either of them a tear. Upon my word, said Eugene to himself as he went to bed, I think I'll be an honest man all my life. It gives you such a pleasant feeling to do as consciousness bids you. It is perhaps only those who believe in God who do good sincerely, and Eugene believed in God. Next day, at the appointed time, Rastignac called on Madame de Basson, and she took him with her to the Duchess de Carigliano's ball. He was most graciously received by the marshal's wife, and in her drawing-room he saw Madame de Nucingen. Delphine had put all her best finery on the hope of winning general admiration, and so appearing still more attractive to Eugene. She was waiting impatiently for a glance from him, and thought no one saw how impatient she was. For a man who can see into a woman's heart, such a moment is delicious. Who has not taken pleasure in withholding his approval and tantalizingly hiding his delight, in causing disquiet for the sake of extorting a confession of affection, and enjoying the fears he will presently dissipate with a smile? In the course of the evening, the student suddenly saw what his position was. He realized that he had some status in this world, and the acknowledged cousin de Madame de Basson. I'm sorry. In the course of the evening, the student suddenly saw what his position was. He realized that he had some status in this world as the acknowledged cousin of Madame de Basson. The conquest of the Baroness de Nucingen, which he was already accredited with, made him a conspicuous figure, and the envious glances of all the other young men gave him his first taste of the pleasures of the fop. Passing from one reception room to another, and moving through the throngs of guests, he overheard people talking about his luck. The women all foretold success for him. Delphine, fearing she might lose him, promised not to refuse him that evening the kiss she had been so obdurate in denying him the evening before. Rastignac received several invitations during the evening. His cousin presented him to other women, all of whom could claim to be persons of fashion, and whose houses were considered pleasant. He felt that he was fairly launched into the smartest and most brilliant social world in Paris. So this evening he had all the charm of a brilliantly successful first appearance in society, and he was to remember it to the end of his days, as a woman remembers the ball where she had her girlish triumphs. The next morning at breakfast, he told the tale of his success to old Goriot and the other boarders. Vautrin began to smile diabolically and applied his savage logic to the situation. Oh, Vautrin. We'll learn about his savage delight tomorrow. Thank you.